Shalom. In this series of videos, we're going to be looking at issues with the two-state solution. Two-state solution is the solution suggested, I think officially first by President George W. Bush to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The idea being that two states should be created between the Jordan River on the east and the Mediterranean Sea on the west. So the Palestinian state would look something like this, where this area labeled in this map, the West Bank, what we call Judea and Samaria, would be part of the Palestinian state, and Gaza would be another part of the Palestinian state with some sort of either bridge or tunnel connecting these two areas of land, and everything else in the lighter shade of red would then remain Israel. It's sort of based off of the concept of the partition plan of the United Nations, and that's what the plan would look like. The two-state solution to the conflict has been this like perpetual cycle of being pronounced dead, and then it's brought back again, and then dead again, and this has been going on for as long as people can remember, almost since 1948, and if not in 1948, then in 1993's Oslo Accord, and then brought back just again, people pronouncing it dead, it wasn't going to work, and now again, people, especially in the Democratic Party, saying that that is the only solution to the conflict. And this solution has been around for so long that I have students that were born after the two-state solution was first suggested. And advocates of the two-state solution think that it's perfect for two reasons. Number one, you separate two people, the Israelis and the Palestinians, who don't get along anyway, and by separating them geographically, then they'll no longer fight. That's one benefit to the two-state solution. Another benefit to the two-state solution is that you'll see that it achieves justice by giving Palestinians their own state. The idea being that Palestinians are a people and they deserve self-determination on their own land, just as Jews do. And by creating a Palestinian state on half or less than half of what was once upon a time called Palestine, so then that will be an act of justice by giving the Palestinians what they deserve. So those are the ideas behind the two-state solution in terms of its benefits. Now let's talk about some of the issues with it in the coming videos. Okay, so let's just start discussing some of the issues with the two-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So the practicalities of how this would work could be debated endlessly. There, in terms of how it would work with if the Palestinian state would not be contiguous, meaning Gaza and the West Bank would be separated. But one thing is very clear: Israelis and Palestinians, and almost every single survey will show this, no longer support the two-state solution. The support for the two-state solution is mostly coming from outside of the region, meaning outside of Israeli communities and outside of Palestinian communities. There just isn't that much support for the two-state solution. So, and the joke goes that there are two Jews, three opinions, but it's never more true than explaining the flaws in the two-state solution among, in terms of its losing support among Palestinians and Israelis. There are so many flaws that people bring up with the two-state solution. It's almost comical that it's still being discussed in a realistic type of way. So that's the second idea. We're going to be going more as we continue through this presentation in terms of some of the flaws that we find both among Israelis and Palestinians, and the reasons why they are no longer in favor of the two-state solution. So let's discuss some of the first flaws of the two-state solution. So the biggest flaw is that Israelis and Palestinians really never bought into it at the start. Now, so there could be surveys and polls that show opposite, that maybe there was widespread support of it, especially in Israel among Israelis. But if you really break it down, you'll see that there wasn't that much enthusiasm and support for it in the first place. Many Israelis and some Palestinians hoped it might succeed. You know, they put hopes in it succeeding, but practically, if you had asked them, did they think it really would happen? The answer mostly would have been no. On both sides of the conflict, many thought, in fact, almost all think that the entire land from the Mediterranean Sea until the Jordan River, what we call Eretz Israel, what the Palestinians call Palestine, what was known as Palestine for 2,000 years, and before that was known as Judea, that the entire land is ours. And as both sides think that the entire land is theirs, so why should they give it up to a foreign entity? The Israelis think that about the Palestinians, and the Palestinians think that about the Israelis. Israelis maintain that they won control of Judea and Samaria in what the Palestinians refer to as the West Bank in 1967 in the Six-Day War. And the Israelis were attacked. We didn't start this war. So therefore, Israelis think winners, winners, losers, losers. As you started a war with us, you lost this land, and now we're supposed to 50 some odd years later give this land back to you as your own state. That's not sensible. Palestinians consider the land stolen from them in 1967 and feel that they deserve to have that land back. Not only that, but Palestinians feel that the entire land from the river to the sea was stolen from them. They commemorate the start of the state of Israel with what's called a Nakba, the day of great catastrophe, and therefore feel that it should definitely be returned to them. Israelis worry that if a Palestinian state were to be created, that it would just be used to attack Israel. It'd be now they would have a state to attack us. They're already committing 3 to 6 terrorist acts a day. So why not? And why give them a state when they'll just continuously attack again? And Palestinians worry that Israelis would use every single terrorist attack as a pretext to attack the fledgling Palestinian state. And then they would close it off to the world, just like Gaza is closed off today. Gaza is mostly closed off. People from Gaza cannot leave Gaza, whether to Israel or to Egypt, because both countries are scared of an attack happening. So therefore, they've closed off the border. So if you live in Gaza, you cannot leave Gaza. You can't leave Gaza by sea. You cannot leave Gaza by air. You cannot leave Gaza by road. You are completely trapped within Gaza. And there are security concerns that caused both Israel and Egypt to secure its borders and close its borders with Gaza, trapping Gazans into their land. Palestinians worry that the same thing will happen if a two-state solution is used to solve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and a Palestinian state is created. That Palestinian state will just be used by Israel to jail them into their own land, giving them no independence whatsoever. So those are some of the first flaws. We're going to go through many of the two-state solution. Let's go on to some of the other flaws that we have with the two-state solution. So another major area of flaws are imbalance. Israelis and Palestinians view the notion of land for peace as inherently imbalanced proposition, both for their own reasons. Israelis contend that there is no reason to give land to Palestinians in the hope that they'll stop their terror attacks. What kind of deal is that? We hope that you'll stop terror, so therefore we're going to give you land on condition that you commit to stopping terrorist attacks. They feel that Palestinians should want to stop terror on their own. And if Palestinians don't see anything wrong with terror and use terror and are proud of terror and honor terrorists, so those aren't the people that Israelis want to be partners with peace in the first place. So why would Israelis create a Palestinian state that would be inherently imbalanced towards the Palestinians, where what we're saying is, listen, you think that terrorism is a good idea, so we'll try to bribe you away from terrorism by giving you land. And hopefully this land will set aside your notions of what terrorism should be. That does not make too much sense to them. Palestinians retort that they have a right to resist, even violently, against Israeli civilians, women, and children. This is a talking point to the Palestinians that they have every right to do that, and they shouldn't stop until they get the land that's rightfully theirs. So therefore, a two-state solution where we trade land for peace in Palestinians' mind was almost also comical, because why should they stop the attack until they get all the land back that belongs to them? So both peoples are looking at the two-state solution as an imbalance, not in their favor, and therefore should not engage in it at all. The next flaws that we see with the two-state solution in this series that we're doing on flaws to the two-state solution stems from the Second Intifada in the early 2000s. Intifada is an uprising where Arabs feel that they can act violently, throw rocks, shoot, bomb, and kill Israeli civilians, even children. That's what happened in 2000. After the failed Camp David summit, where Prime Minister Ehud Barak and Bill Clinton and Yasser Arafat gathered together at Camp David for trying to finally come up with a solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and a peace deal. So Yasser Arafat returned to Ramallah after that failed summit and quickly initiated, and now there are documents and 100% proof that he initiated the Second Intifada. It also became clear to Israelis at Camp David that Arafat had no interest in making peace with Israel. He had engaged in bad faith negotiations with Prime Minister Barak and President Clinton, and he rejected all Israeli peace offers without even a counteroffer. Since there was no counteroffer, it became very clear to Israelis that he had no interest whatsoever in a peace deal, and the whole thing was a sham by him coming to Camp David. Later, and by the way, this is not just the Israeli side talking point. This is actually the talking point that President Bill Clinton in his book, My Life. He writes that this is completely Arafat's fault, that he had no interest whatsoever in peace. George W. Bush, the next president after Bill Clinton, when later revelations made clear that Arafat had actually started ordering the Intifada at Camp David in the midst of negotiations, George W. Bush forbade Yasser Arafat from entering the United States and having any sort of deal, and promised the Palestinians, this is where the two-state solution officially got off the ground, that he would be in favor of a second state if they became serious about peace. And when he meant serious about peace, he meant getting rid of Yasser Arafat. The Intifada had wide support among all sectors of the Palestinian population. And that's where Israelis lost faith, for the most part, in the Palestinian neighbors' capacity for peace. They looked at their neighbors and said, you're supporting armed attack against our children, blowing up our buses, blowing up our pizzerias. Why in the world would we want to have peace with you? You're clearly showing what side you're on when it comes to peace on one side and terrorism on the other. The Palestinians saw the Israeli response to the Intifada and realized that Israelis would always have the power to limit their movements. So they also gave up on the two-state solution, as they realized that there would never be a balance of power between Israelis and the Palestinians. So even if Palestinians had their own state, it wouldn't do much for them, because the Israelis would always be heavy-handed in making sure that they weren't able to create their own state. Okay, continuing on finding flaws with the two-state solution, Gaza is a tremendous area where we find that there's much to that using Gaza as the model shows that a two-state solution wouldn't work. In 2005, Israel unilaterally, meaning not part of a deal with the Palestinians, pulled out of Gaza, pulled every single Israeli citizen out of Gaza and every single Israeli soldier. Since 2005, there are no Israeli soldiers stationed or no Israeli civilians living in Gaza. Israelis were told by their own leaders, by Ariel Sharon, that the pullout from Gaza would enhance their security. They had been told that given their own independence, without Israeli interference and presence in their daily lives, Palestinians would stop all attacks on Israelis from Gaza. But then Israelis watched as the Palestinian Authority quickly lost control of Gaza to Hamas. The Palestinian Authority showed it couldn't stop Hamas from attacking Israel, or even from attacking the Palestinian Authority themselves. Hamas was taking Palestinian Authority officials and shooting them in the knees and throwing them off the roofs of their homes. In less than 5 days, Hamas had taken over all of Gaza. Israelis saw that, just like in Lebanon, an Israeli withdrawal from land would lead to a staging ground for Palestinian attacks on Israel. That's what they saw happening in Gaza, right? Israelis worry that the same Hamas takeover, with attacks on Israelis and over 25,000 rockets fired from Gaza to Israel, would happen from Judea and Samaria if Israel pulled out to create a Palestinian state. Now, that's the Israeli fear. What they look at Gaza and say the two-state solution will never work. They point to Gaza and look what happened. But Palestinians also look at Gaza and say the two-state solution won't work. Why? Because they watched as Israel pulled its army, people, and towns from Gaza, and in their eyes did so in a way that set the Palestinian Authority up for failure. They didn't coordinate this with the Palestinians. They did this on their own in a way that would set the Palestinian Authority up for failure and have Hamas take over. Almost the Palestinians accused Israel of wanting that situation so they would never have to give up the West Bank. Israel set the Palestinian Authority up for failure, so Israel can later claim that the Palestinians can't manage their own land independently. They claim that Israel's closed off its borders, occupying it from all around. They worry that if Israel ever pulled out of the disputed territory, what we call Judea and Samaria, they call the West Bank, it would create this same open-air prison and in the new Palestinian state. In this segment, we're going to look at our last sources of where the flaws for the two-state solution occur, and this is the failure of peace negotiations. Every single peace negotiation for the last 25 years that we've been negotiating peace with the Palestinians has failed, completely failed. Israelis seized the failed Camp David negotiations, the Annapolis Summit, why, and all other different places. Abbas's refusal to negotiate for the last 10 years as signs that the Palestinians aren't serious about peace. So why should we be making steps or holding ourselves back in the efforts of creating a two-state solution? Palestinians have seen Israelis negotiate and demand more negotiations, all the while building on land that they consider their future Palestinian state. They perceive Israelis as disingenuous about creating an independent Palestinian state and see Israelis not serious about the two-state solution. So why should they negotiate for a two-state solution that's really only buying Israelis time to keep building on land that there are? In other words, creating facts on the ground so that in negotiations, Israelis will be able to claim, well, what can we do? We wanted to create a second state for you, but we have towns in these and these and these and these and these areas, so we obviously can't give that to you as a state. And therefore, there's no real two-state solution. Lastly, let's conclude our discussion and our series on issues with the two-state solution. So Israelis and Palestinians hate being taken advantage of and being losers in any deal. Israelis have a term for it. It's called being a friar. The Israeli and Palestinian neurosis about being perceived as a friar isn't something really Americans or the Western mind can understand. Both sides have been made to feel as fools time and time again. Israelis and Palestinians both commit to not allowing it to happen again. They understand the two-state solution as an idea that will cause both sides to be a friar, and therefore both sides have dropped all support of it. It's time, this is my own contention, that the world catches up and thinks of a better solution to end the Palestinian conflict. I don't have that solution, but I'll tell you that this two-state solution, not only is it not feasible, not only is it not practical, not only has it lost support in this region, but by continuously pushing bad ideas like the two-state solution, it just makes the situation worse because it causes despair in the region that there really isn't a solution. When despair hits this region, it always ends up in violence. And that's why it's time we stopped talking about the two-state solution and started working on other ways that we could create peace in this region. Shalom.